progressive metal. There are a few different strategies you can implement to really get a certain sound that distinguishes this genre from, say, regular metal or regular rock and roll, and those things are subjective, of course. I'm going to give you my interpretation of my influences paired with my own style, and hopefully get some creative juices flowing for you in order to compose your own prog rock riffage. I want to let you know that I'm going to be getting into a fair amount of music theory in this guitar lesson, so if you're interested in learning music theory from somebody like me, check out Guitar Super System. There's a link right down below, and you can learn from the basics all the way into the echelons of the absurd, if you want. As well as tips, tricks, licks, everything else under the sun. If you're a guitar player, check out Guitar Super System. Link down below. Let's get started. The first parameter I want to point out is the tuning in this style of music, and I am using a 7-string guitar. You don't have to use a 7-string, but extended range instruments are certainly a staple of this style of music. I mean, listen to this. Just that access to a lower octave, I think, is just really cool and kind of modern sounding. Obviously, this is almost being treated as a baritone. I just have it in standard tuning. This is the low B. Sometimes you can tune this to drop A, or a variety of other tunings. And if you're curious about the tone, this is actually a plugin I'm using, and this isn't sponsored or anything, but I'm using Tosin Abasi's Neural DSP plugin. I think they make really great plugins, and I actually ran into Tosin at the NAMM show last year and chatted with him a little bit.
Our plugin is my actual touring signal path, i.e. my pedals and my amps, represented in digital form with the same feel and tonal quality. So if you want to like have that sound for a very low cost in your laptop and have it be legit, like it feels great, sounds great, that's what we got.
Hopefully I can have him on my channel at some point and pick his brain about guitar playing, because there's a lot there to investigate, and he's certainly an ambassador in some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about in today's video. So now that you know the tools that we're working with in this genre, I want to talk about time, and specifically time signatures. Let me play a little riff for you. If you were to guess, what time signature do you think that's in? Did you guess 4/4? Because that's in 4/4. The interesting thing about this, and I actually had a conversation with Tim Henson on my Guitar Villains podcast.
Just writing music in 4/4 isn't any sort of like knock. You can do so much with that,
Oh,
and
yeah.
especially if you're just feeling it, you know.
I was super surprised to learn, like just recently, like a few months ago, Tosin Abasi taught me how to thumb. And like I'm like learning this technique from him, and like we're kind of like going over like examples of like animal songs. And I was super surprised to learn that like a lot of those are in 4/4.
You can do so much with 4/4. It doesn't necessarily have to be any complex time signature to convey an odd feel. So basically where you put downbeats can really impact the listener. So you don't necessarily have to be intimidated to write something in 9/8, for example, when you can accomplish pretty much anything you want with that common 4/4 time signature. Now moving on to some harmonic choices. The difference between progressive and classic rock, for example, is the progressive elements traditionally employ a little bit more complex harmony. A traditional rock riff might go something like this. Something basic like that. Progressive music tends to have a little bit more, let's call them harmonic bridges. So that chord progression could work, but there would be some sort of transition to get to potentially a key change. So maybe something like this. So when you're thinking about harmony, in this key, I am in this kind of B minor tonality. And I am modulating to an F sharp tonality, and in order to do that, I'm using this little harmonic bridge. So it sort of feels like I'm still in that B minor sound. And yet I have moved to a different key, and then again. So I'm moving between keys, but I'm using these diatonic harmonic bridges that make it feel like, oh, well, I still sort of feel I'm sort of sidestepping. I'm not necessarily jumping into the next chord, if that makes sense. And I'm accomplishing that by choosing notes from the current diatonic chord shape and just simply rolling down. And notice every time I do that, I will sort of approach that next chord chromatically, so it feels less abrasive than if I were to choose a larger interval. So that is harmony in the progressive genre. It's very topsy-turvy. There's not necessarily one key the entire song. There's a lot of changing going on, but it doesn't necessarily have to feel like it's changing. The best music, I think, is music that kind of takes you in a little journey and doesn't necessarily tell you that it's taking a left turn or a right turn. It just kind of feels like one big trip. So that, in a nutshell, is what is going to lead us to lead guitar playing, which is going to take the same approach. With my classic rock kind of background, I have a lot of rock licks and blues licks and a little bit of jazz kind of sprinkled in. But obviously with this more aggressive tone, you can sometimes wield some very mysterious sorcery. So obviously that guitar solo on its own, I'm going to put some harmonic context behind it in a moment, but I just wanted you to hear an unfiltered listen of a guitar solo that really moves through harmonic concepts, mainly chromatically. I would say the chromatics are the big thing in my own guitar playing that I kind of interject into more traditional rock licks, which I think makes it sound more progressive. We can come up with some pretty interesting sounds, and obviously legato is a really important technique. You know, sweep picking, legato, all of these things are kind of born from this metal genre. The best thing to do to learn to play music like this is to listen to people who are really, really good at it. I'm alright, I have a pretty good understanding. It's not necessarily my forte, but I do appreciate music like this. Bands like Animals as Leaders, or Periphery, or Polyphia, or even older bands like Symphony X. I really dig this kind of music, and of course, the master, John Petrucci, Dream Theater, Liquid Tension Experiment, his solo stuff. I think that is more than enough music for you to check out and get inspired by. So let's put this track into action. The little sections I've been alluding to, we're going to hear what they sound like in a musical context, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Until next time.